Good afternoon. Welcome back to Sister for Sister Story Time with your sister Shaya Loya, the historian. We are currently reading the secret teachings of all ages, the current chapter, the Fraternity of the Rose Cross. One moment while I share my screen. The Fraternity of the Rose Cross. Who were the Rosicrucians? Were they an organization of profound thinkers rebelling against the inquisitional religious and philosophical limitations of their time? Or were they isolated transcendentalists united only by the similarity of their viewpoints and deductions? Where was the house of the Holy Spirit, in which, according to their manifestos, they met once a year to plan the future activities of their order? Who was the mysterious person referred to as our illustrious father and brother CRC? Did those three letters actually stand for the words Christian Rosy Cross? Was Christian Rosencreutz, the supposed author of the Chemical Nuptials, the same person who, with three others, founded the Society of the Rose Cross? What relationship existed between Rosicrucianism and medieval Freemasonry? Why were the destinies of these two organizations so closely interwoven? Is the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross the much sought after link connecting the Freemasonry of the Middle Ages with the symbolism and mysticism of antiquity? And are its secrets being perpetuated by modern Masonry? Did the original Rosicrucian order disintegrate in the latter part of the 18th century, or does the society still exist as an organization, maintaining the same secrecy for which it was originally famous? What was the true purpose for which the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross was formed? Were the Rosicrucians a religious and philosophic brotherhood, as they claimed to be, or were they avowed tenets blind to conceal the true object of the fraternity, which possibly was the political control of Europe? These are some of the problems involved in the study of Rosicrucianism. There are four distinct theories regarding the Rosicrucian enigma. Each is the result of a careful consideration of the evidence by scholars who have spent their lives ransacking the archives of Hermetic lore. The conclusions reached demonstrate clearly the inadequacy of the records available concerning the genesis and early activities of the Brethren of the Rose Cross. The first postulate: it is assumed that the Rosicrucian order existed historically in accordance with the description of its foundation and subsequent activities published in its manifesto, the Fama Fraternitatis, I guess, which is believed to have been written in the year 1610, but apparently did not appear in print until 1614, although an earlier edition is suspected by some authorities. Intelligent consideration of the origin of Rosicrucianism requires a familiarity with the contents of the first and most important of its documents. The Fama Fraternitas begins with a reminder to all the world of God's goodness and mercy, and it warns the intelligentsia that their egotism and covetousness cause them to follow after false prophets and to ignore the true knowledge which God in his goodness has revealed to them. Hence, a reformation is necessary, and God has raised up philosophers as sages for this purpose. In order to assist in bringing about the Reformation, a mysterious person called the Highly Illuminated Father CRC, a German by birth, descended of a noble family, but himself a poor man, instituted the secret society of the Rose Cross, or CRC, was placed in a cloister when only 5 years of age, but later becoming dissatisfied with its educational system, he associated himself with a brother of holy orders who was setting forth on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. They started out together, but the brother died at Cyprus and CRC continued alone to Damascus. Poor health prevented him from reaching Jerusalem, so he remained at Damascus studying with the philosophers who dwelt there. While pursuing his studies, he heard of a group of mystics and Kabbalists abiding in the mystic Arabian city of Damkar. Giving up his desire to visit Jerusalem, he arranged with the Arabians for his transportation to Damkar. CRC was but 16 years of age when he arrived at Damkar. He was received as one who had been long expected, a comrade and a friend in philosophy, and was instructed in the secrets of the Arabian adepts. While there, CRC learned the Arabic tongue and translated the sacred book into Latin. And upon returning to Europe, he brought this important volume with him. After studying 3 years in Damkar, CRC departed for the city of Fez, where the Arabian magicians declared further information would be given him. At Fez, he was instructed how to communicate with the elementary inhabitants, probably the nature spirits, and these disclosed to him many other great secrets of nature. While the philosophers in Fez were not so great as those in Damkar, the previous experiences of CRC enabled him to distinguish the true from the false and thus add greatly to his store of knowledge. After 2 years in Fez, CRC sailed for Spain, carrying with him many treasures, among them rare plants and animals accumulated during his wanderings. He fondly hoped that the learned men of Europe would receive with gratitude the rare intellectual and material treasures which he had brought for their consideration. Instead, he encountered only ridicule, for the so-called wise were afraid to admit their previous ignorance lest their prestige be impaired. At this point in the narrative is an interpolation stating that Paracelsus, while not a member of the Fraternity of the Rosencreutz, had read the book and from a consideration of its contents had secured information which made him the foremost physician of medieval Europe. Tired but not discouraged, as the result of the fruitlessness of his efforts, CRC returned to Germany, where he built a house in which he could quietly carry on his study and research. He also manufactured a number of rare scientific instruments for research purposes. While he could have made himself famous had he cared to commercialize his knowledge, he preferred the companionship of God to the esteem of men. After 5 years of retirement, he decided to renew his struggle for a reformation of the arts and sciences of his day, this time with the aid of a few trusted friends. He sent the cloister where his early training had been received and called to himself 3 brethren, whom he bound by an oath to preserve inviolate the secrets he should impart and to write down, for the sake of posterity, the information he should dictate. These 4 founded the Fraternity of the Rosencreutz. They prepared its secret cipher language and, according to the Fama, a great dictionary in which all forms of wisdom were classified to the glorification of God. They also began the work of transcribing the book but found the task too difficult because of the demands of the great numbers of sick who came to them for healing. The Golden and Rosy Cross. It is said of this cross that it is made of spiritual gold and that each brother wears it upon his breast. It bears the alchemical symbols of salt, sulfur, and mercury, also a star of the planets, and around it are the 4 words faith, hope, love, and patience. The double-headed eagle or phoenix subtly foreshadows the ultimate androgynous state of the human creature. Rosicrucian alchemy was not concerned with metals alone. Man's own body was the alchemical laboratory, and none could reach Rosicrucian adeptship until he had performed the supreme experiment of transmutation by changing the base metals of ignorance into the pure gold of wisdom and understanding. Having completed a newer and larger building, which they called the House of the Holy Spirit, they decided to include 4 new members in the fraternity, thus increasing the number to 8, 7 of whom were German. All were unmarried. Working industriously together, they speedily completed the arduous labor of preparing the documents, instructions, and arcana of the order. They also put the house called Sanctus Spiritus in order. They then decided to separate and visit the other countries of the earth, not only that their wisdom might be given to others who deserved it, but also that they might check and correct any mistakes existing in their own system. Before separating, the brethren prepared 6 rules or bylaws, and each bound himself to obey them. The first rule was that they should take to themselves no other dignity or credit than that they were willing to heal the sick without charge. The second was that from that time on forever they should wear no special robe or garment, but should dress according to the custom of the country wherein they dwelt. The third stated that every year upon a certain day they should meet in the house of the Holy Spirit, or if unable to do so, should be represented by an epistle. The fourth decreed that each member should search for a worthy person to succeed him at his own demise. The fifth stated that the letters RC should be their seal, mark, and character from that time onward. The sixth specified that the fraternity should remain unknown to the world for a period of 100 years. After they had sworn to this code, 5 of the brothers departed to distant lands, and a year later, 2 of the others also went their way, leaving Father CRC alone in the house of the Holy Spirit. Year after year, they met with great joy, for they had quietly and sincerely promulgated their doctrines among the wise of the earth. When the first of the order died in England, it was decided that the burial places of the members should be secret. Soon afterward, Father CRC called the remaining 6 together, and it is supposed that then he prepared his own symbolic tomb. The Fama records that none of the brothers alive at the time of its writing knew when Father CRC died or where he was buried. His body was accidentally discovered 120 years after his death, when one of the brothers, who possessed considerable architectural skill, decided to make some alterations in the house of the Holy Spirit. It is only suspected that the tomb was in this building. While making his alterations, the brother discovered a memorial tablet upon which were inscribed the names of the earlier members of the order. This he decided to transfer to a more imposing chapel, for at that time no one knew in what country Father CRC had died, this information having been concealed by the original members. In attempting to remove the memorial tablet, which was held in place by a large nail, some stones and plastering were broken from the wall, disclosing a door concealed in the masonry. The members of the order immediately cleared away the rest of the debris and uncovered the entrance to a vault. Upon the door in large letters were the words Post CXX Annos Petibo. This, according to the mystic interpretation of the brethren, meant in 120 years I shall come forth. The following morning, the door was opened and the members entered a vault with 7 sides and 7 corners, each side 5 feet broad and 8 feet high. Although the sun never penetrated this tomb, it was brilliantly illuminated by a mysterious light in the ceiling. In the center was a circular altar upon which were brass plates engraved with strange characters. In each of the 7 sides was a small door, which, upon being opened, revealed a number of boxes filled with books, secret instructions, and the supposedly lost arcanum of the fraternity. Upon moving the altar to one side, a brass cover was disclosed. Lifting this revealed a body, presumably that of CRC, which, although it had lain there 120 years, was as well preserved as though it had just been entered. It was ornamented and attired in robes of the order, and in one hand was clasped a mysterious parchment, which, next to the Bible, was the most valued possession of the society. After thoroughly investigating the contents of the secret chamber, the brass plate and altar were put back in place. The door of the vault was again sealed, and the brothers went their respective ways, their spirits raised and their faith increased by the miraculous spectacle which they had beheld. The document ends by saying, in effect, in accordance with the will of Father CRC, the Fama has been prepared and sent forth to the wise and learned of all Europe in 5 languages, that all may know and understand the secrets of the august fraternity. All of sincere soul who labor for the glory of God are invited to communicate with the brethren and are promised that their appeal shall be heard, regardless of where they are or how the messages are sent. At the same time, those of selfish and ulterior motives are warned that only sorrow and misery will attend any who attempt to discover the fraternity without a clean heart and a pure mind. Such, in brief, is the story of the Fama Fraternitatis. Those who accept it literally regard Father CRC as the actual founder of the Brotherhood, which he is believed to have organized about 1400. The fact that historical corroboration of the important points of the Fama has never been discovered is held against this theory. There is no proof that Father CRC ever approached the learned men of Spain. The mysterious city of Damkar cannot be found, and there is no record that anywhere in Germany there existed a place where great numbers of the halt and sick came and were mysteriously healed. A.E. Waite's The Secret Tradition in Freemasonry contains a picture of Father CRC showing him with a long beard upon his breast, sitting before a table upon which burns a candle. One hand is supporting his head, and the other is resting the tip of its index finger on the temple of a human skull. The picture, however, see plate at head of chapter, proves nothing. Father CRC was never seen by other than members of his own order, and they did not preserve a description of him. That his name was Christian Rosencreutz is most improbable, as the two were not even associated until the writing of the Chymical Nuptials. The second postulate. Those Masonic brethren who have investigated the subject accept the historical existence of the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross, but are divided concerning the origin of the order. One group holds the society originated in medieval Europe as an outgrowth of alchemical speculation. Robert McCoy, 33 Degree, believes that Johann Valentin Andrea, a German theologian, was the true founder, and he also believes it possible that this divine merely reformed and amplified an existing society which had been founded by Sir Henry Cornelius Agrippa. Some believe that Rosicrucianism represented the first European invasion of Buddhist and Brahmin culture. Still, others hold the opinion that the Society of the Rose Cross was founded in Egypt during the philosophic supremacy of that empire, and that it also perpetuated the mysteries of ancient Persia and Chaldea. In his Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins writes, the Rosicrucians of Germany are quite ignorant of their origin, but by tradition, they suppose themselves descendants of the ancient Egyptians, Chaldeans, Magi, and Gymnosophis. The last was a name given by the followers of Alexander the Great to a caste of naked wise men whom they found meditating along the riverbanks in India. The consensus among these factions is that the story of Father CRC, like the Masonic legend of Hiram Abif, is an allegory and should not be considered literally. A similar problem has confronted students of the Bible who have found not only difficult, but in the majority of cases impossible, their efforts to substantiate the historical interpretation of the scriptures. Admitting the existence of the Rosicrucians as a secret society with both philosophic and political ends, it is remarkable that an organization with members in all parts of Europe could maintain absolute secrecy throughout the centuries. Nevertheless, the Brothers of the Rose Cross were apparently able to accomplish this. A great number of scholars and philosophers, among them Sir Francis Bacon and Wolfgang von Goethe, have been suspected of affiliation with the order, but their connection has not been established to the satisfaction of prosaic historians. Pseudo Rosicrucians abounded, but the true members of the ancient and secret order of the unknown philosophers have successfully lived up to their name. To this day, they remain unknown. During the Middle Ages, a number of tracts appeared purporting to be from the pens of Rosicrucians. Many of them, however, were spurious, being issued for their aggrandizement by unscrupulous persons who used the revered and magic name Rosicrucian in the hope of gaining religious or political power. This has greatly complicated the work of investigating the society. One group of pseudo Rosicrucians went so far as to supply its members with a black cord by which they were to know each other, and warned them that if they broke their vow of secrecy, the cord would be used to strangle them. Few of the principles of Rosicrucianism have been preserved in literature, for the original fraternity published only fragmentary accounts of its principles and activities. In his Secret Symbols of the Rosicrucians, Dr. Franz Hartmann describes the fraternity as a secret society of men possessing superhuman, if not supernatural powers. They were said to be able to prophesy future events, to penetrate into the deepest mysteries of nature, to transform iron, copper, lead, or mercury into gold, to prepare an elixir of life or universal panacea, by the use of which they could preserve their youth and manhood. And moreover, it was believed that they could command the elemental spirits of nature, and knew the secret of the philosopher's stone, a substance which rendered him who possessed it all powerful, immortal, and supremely wise. The crucified rose. The original symbol of the Rosicrucian fraternity was a hieroglyphic rose crucified upon a cross. The cross was often raised upon a three-stepped Calvary. Occasionally, the symbol of a cross rising from a rose was used in connection with their activities. The Rosicrucian rose was drawn upon the round table of King Arthur and is the central motif for the links forming the chain from which the Great George is suspended among the jewels of the Order of the Garter. Hargrave Jennings suspects this order of having some connection with the Rosicrucians. The same author further defines a Rosicrucian as a person who, by the process of spiritual awakening, has attained a practical knowledge of the secret significance of the rose and the cross. To call a person a Rosicrucian does not make him one, nor does the act of calling a person a Christian make him a Christ. The real Rosicrucian or Mason cannot be made. He must grow to be one by the expansion and unfoldment of the divine power within his own heart. The inattention to this truth is the cause that many churches and secret societies are far from being that which their names express. The symbolic principles of Rosicrucianism are so profound that even today they are little appreciated. Their charts and diagrams are concerned with weighty cosmic principles, which they treat with a philosophic understanding decidedly refreshing when compared with the orthodox narrowness prevalent in their day. According to available records, the Rosicrucians were bound together by mutual aspirations rather than by the laws of a fraternity. The brothers of the Rose Cross are believed to have lived unobtrusively, laboring industriously in trades and professions, disclosing their secret affiliation to no one, in many cases, not even to their own families. After the death of CRC, most of the brethren apparently had no central meeting place. Whatever initiatory ritual the order possessed was so closely guarded that it has never been revealed. Doubtless, it was couched in chemical terminology. Efforts to join the order were apparently futile, for the Rosicrucians always chose their disciples. Having agreed on one who they believed would do honor to their illustrious fraternity, they communicated with him in one of many mysterious ways. He might receive a letter, either anonymous or with a peculiar seal, usually bearing the letters CRC or RC upon it. He would be instructed to go to a certain place at an appointed time. What was disclosed to him he never revealed, although in many cases his later writings showed that a new influence had come into his life, deepening his understanding and broadening his intellect. A few have written allegorically concerning what they beheld when in the august presence of the Brethren of the Rose Cross. Alchemists were sometimes visited in their laboratories by mysterious strangers who delivered learned courses concerning the secret processes of the Hermetic arts, and after disclosing certain processes, departed, leaving no trace. Others declared that the brothers of the Rose Cross communicated with them through dreams and visions, revealing the secrets of Hermetic wisdom to them while they were asleep. Having been instructed, the candidate was bound to secrecy not only concerning the chemical formula which had been disclosed to him, but also concerning the method by which he had secured them. While these nameless adepts were suspected of being brothers of the Rose Cross, it could never be proved who they were, and those visited could only conjecture. Many suspect the Rosicrucian rose to be a conventionalization of the Egyptian and Hindu lotus blossom, with the same symbolic meaning as this more ancient symbol. The Divine Comedy stamps Dante Alighieri as being familiar with the theory of Rosicrucianism. Concerning this point, Albert Pike, in his Morals and Dogma, makes this significant statement. His hell is but a negative purgatory. His heaven is composed of a series of Kabbalistic circles divided by a cross, like the pentacle of Ezekiel. In the center of this cross blooms a rose, and we see the symbol of the adepts of the Rosencreutz for the first time publicly expounded and almost categorically explained. Doubt has always existed as to whether the name Rosicrucian came from the symbol of the rose and cross, or whether this was merely a blind to deceive the uninformed and further conceal the true meaning of the order. Godfrey Higgins believes that the word Rosicrucian is not derived from the flower, but from the word ros, which means dew or rose. It is also interesting to note that the word ros means wisdom, while rus is translated concealment. Doubtless, all of these meanings have contributed to Rosicrucian symbolism. A.E. Waite holds with Godfrey Higgins that the process of forming the philosopher's stone with the aid of dew is the secret concealed within the name Rosicrucian. It is possible that the dew referred to is a mysterious substance within the human brain, closely resembling the description given by alchemists of the dew which, falling from heaven, redeemed the earth. The cross is symbolic of the human body, and the two symbols together, the rose on the cross, signify that the soul of man is crucified upon the body, where it is held by three nails. It is probable that Rosicrucian symbolism is a perpetuation of the secret tenets of the Egyptian Hermes, and that the Society of Unknown Philosophers is the true link connecting modern Masonry, with its mass of symbols, to ancient Egyptian Hermeticism, the source of that symbolism. In his Doctrine and Literature of the Kabbalah, A.E. Waite makes this important observation. There are certain indications which point to a possible connection between Masonry and Rosicrucianism, and this, if admitted, would constitute the first link in its connection with the past. The evidence is, however, inconclusive or at least unextricated. Freemasonry per se, in spite of the affinity with mysticism, which I have just mentioned, has never exhibited any mystic character, nor has it a clear notion how it came by its symbols. Many of those connected with the development of Freemasonry were suspected of being Rosicrucians. Some, as in the case of Robert Flood, even wrote defenses of this organization. Frank C. Higgins, a modern Masonic symbolist, writes, Dr. Ashmole, a member of this fraternity, Rosicrucianism, is revered by Masons as one of the founders of the first Grand Lodge in London. Elias Ashmole is but one of many intellectual links connecting Rosicrucianism with the genesis of Freemasonry. The Encyclopedia Britannica notes that Elias Ashmole was initiated into the Freemasonic order in 1646 and further states that he was the first gentleman or amateur to be accepted. On this same subject, Pappas, in his Tarot of the Bohemians, has written, we must not forget that the Rosicrucians were the initiators of Leibniz and the founders of actual Freemasonry through Ashmole. If the founders of Freemasonry were initiated into the great arcanum of Egypt, and the symbolism of modern Masonry would indicate that such was the case, then it is reasonable to suppose that they secured their information from a society whose existence they admitted and which was duly qualified to teach them these symbols and allegories. One theory concerning the two orders is to the effect that Freemasonry was an outgrowth of Rosicrucianism. In other words, that the unknown philosophers became known through an organization which they created to serve them in the material world. The story goes on to relate that the Rosicrucian adepts became dissatisfied with their progeny and silently withdrew from the Masonic hierarchy, leaving behind their symbolism and allegories, but carrying away the keys by which the locked symbols could be made to give tip their secret meanings. Speculators have gone so far as to state that, in their opinion, modern Freemasonry has completely absorbed Rosicrucianism and succeeded it as the world's greatest secret society. Other minds of equal learning declare that the Rosicrucian Brotherhood still exists, preserving its individuality as the result of having withdrawn from the Masonic order. According to a widely accepted tradition, the headquarters of the Rosicrucian order is near Carlsbad in Austria. Another version has it that a mysterious school resembling in general principles the Rosicrucian fraternity, which calls itself the Bohemian Brothers, still maintains its individuality in the Schwarzwald Black Forest of Germany. One thing is certain, with the rise of Freemasonry, the Rosicrucian order in Europe practically disappeared, and notwithstanding existing statements to the contrary, it is certain that the 18th degree, commonly known as the Rosencreutz, perpetuates many of the symbols of the Rosicrucian fire alchemist. In an anonymous unpublished manuscript of the 18th century bearing the earmarks of Rosicrucian Kabbalism appears this statement: Yet will I now give the overwise world a paradox to be solved, namely, that some illuminated men have undertaken to found schools of wisdom in Europe, and these for some peculiar reason have called themselves Fratres Rosicrucis. But soon afterwards came false schools into existence and corrupted the good intentions of these wise men. Therefore, the order no longer exists, and most people would understand existence. And as this fraternity of the Seculophili called themselves Brothers of the Rosy Cross, so also will they in the Seculo Spiritus Sancti call themselves Brothers of the Lily Cross and the Knights of the White Lion. Then will the schools of wisdom begin again to blossom. But why the first one chose their name and why the others shall also choose theirs, only those can solve who have understanding grounded in nature. The Rosicrucian rose. The rose is a yonic symbol associated with generation, fecundity, and purity. The fact that flowers blossom by unfolding has caused them to be chosen as symbolic of spiritual unfoldment. The red color of the rose refers to the blood of Christ, and the golden heart concealed within the midst of the flower corresponds to the spiritual gold concealed within the human nature. The number of its petals being 10 is also a subtle reminder of the perfect Pythagorean number. The rose symbolizes the heart, and the heart has always been accepted by Christians as emblematic of the virtues of love and compassion, as well as of the nature of Christ, the personification of these virtues. The rose as a religious emblem is of great antiquity. It was accepted by the Greeks as the symbol of the sunrise or of the coming of dawn. In his Metamorphosis or Golden Ass, Apuleius, turned into a donkey because of his foolishness, regained his human shape by eating a sacred rose given to him by the Egyptian priest. The presence of a hieroglyphic rose upon the escutcheon of Martin Luther has been the basis of much speculation as to whether any connection existed between his Reformation and the secret activities of the Rose Cross. Political aspirations of the Rosicrucians were expressed through the activities of Sir Francis Bacon, the Comte de Saint Germain, and the Comte de Cagliostro. The last named is suspected of having been an emissary of the Knights Templars, a society deeply involved in transcendentalism, as Eliphas Levi has noted. There is a popular supposition to the effect that the Rosicrucians were at least partial instigators of the French Revolution. Note particularly the introduction to Lord Bulwer-Lytton's Rosicrucian novel Zanoni. The third postulate. The third theory takes the form of a sweeping denial of Rosicrucianism, asserting that the so called original order never had any foundation in fact, but was entirely a product of imagination. This viewpoint is best expressed by a number of questions which are still being asked by investigators of this elusive group of metaphysicians. Was the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross merely a mythical institution created in the fertile mind of some literary cynic for the purpose of deriding the alchemical and hermetic sciences? Did the House of the Holy Spirit ever exist outside the imagination of some medieval mystic? Was the whole Rosicrucian story a satire to ridicule the gullibility of scholastic Europe? Was the mysterious Father CRC a product of the literary genius of Johann Valentin Andrea, or another of similar mind who, attempting to score alchemical and hermetic philosophy, unwittingly became a great power in furthering the cause of its promulgation? That at least one of the early documents of the Rosicrucians was from the pen of Andre, there is little doubt, but for just what purpose he compiled it still remains a matter of speculation. Did Andre himself receive from some unknown person or persons instructions to be carried out? If he wrote the chemical nuptials of Christian Rosencreutz when only 15 years old, was he overshadowed in the preparation of that book? To these vital questions, no answers are forthcoming. A number of persons accepted the magnificent imposture of Andre as absolute truth. It is maintained by many that, as a consequence, numerous pseudo societies sprang up, each asserting that it was the organization concerning which the Fama Fraternitatis and the Confessio Fraternitatis were written. Beyond doubt, there are many spurious orders in existence today, but few of them can offer valid claims that their history dates back farther than the beginning of the 19th century. The mystery associated with the Rosicrucian fraternity has resulted in endless controversy. Many able minds, notable among them Eugenius Philolates, Michael Meyer, John Hayden, and Robert Flood, defended the concrete existence of the Society of Unknown Philosophers. Others, equally qualified, have asserted it to be of fraudulent origin and doubtful existence. Eugenius Philolates, while dedicating books to the order and himself writing an extended exposition of its principles, disclaims all personal connection with it. Many others have done likewise. Some are the opinion that Sir Francis Bacon had a hand in the writing of the Fama and Confessio Fraternitatis on the basis that the rhetorical style of these works is similar to that of Bacon's New Atlantis. They also contend that certain statements in the latter work point to an acquaintance with Rosicrucian symbology. The elusiveness of the Rosicrucians has caused them to be favorite subjects for literary works. Outstanding among the romances which have been woven around them is Zanoni. The author, Lord Bulwer Lytton, is regarded by some as a member of the order, while others assert that he applied for membership but was rejected. Pope's Rape of the Lock, Comte de Gabalis by Abbé de Villers, and essays by De Quincey Hartman, Jennings, Mackenzie, and others are examples of Rosicrucian literature. Although the existence of these medieval Rosicrucians is difficult to prove, sufficient evidence is at hand to make it extremely probable that there existed in Germany and afterwards in France, Italy, England, and other European countries a secret society of illuminated savants who made contributions of great import to the sum of human knowledge while maintaining absolute secrecy concerning their personalities and their organization. The fourth postulate. The apparent incongruities of the Rosicrucian controversy have also been accounted for by a purely transcendental explanation. There is evidence that early writers were acquainted with such a supposition, which, however, was popularized only after it had been espoused by Theosophy. This theory asserts that the Rosicrucians actually possessed all the supernatural powers with which they were credited, that they were in reality citizens of two worlds, that while they had physical bodies for expression on the material plane, they were also capable, through the instructions they received from the Brotherhood, of functioning in a mysterious ethereal body not subject to the limitations of time or distance. By means of this astral form, they were able to function in the invisible realm of nature, and in this realm, beyond reach of the profane, their temple was located. According to this viewpoint, the true Rosicrucian Brotherhood consisted of a limited number of highly developed adepts or initiates, those of the higher degrees being no longer subject to the laws of mortality. Candidates were accepted into the order only after long periods of probation. Adepts possessed the secret of the philosopher's stone and knew the process of transmuting the base metals into gold, but taught that these were only allegorical terms concealing the true mystery of human regeneration through the transmutation of the base elements of man's lower nature into the gold of intellectual and spiritual realization. According to this theory, those who have sought to record the events of importance in connection with the Rosicrucian controversy have invariably failed because they approached their subject from a purely physical or materialistic angle. These adepts were believed to have been able to teach man how to function away from his physical body at will by assisting him to remove the rose from the cross. They taught that the spiritual nature was attached to the material form at certain points, symbolized by the nails of the crucifixion. But by the three alchemical initiations which took place in the spiritual world, in the true temple of the Rose Cross, they were able to draw these nails and permit the divine nature of man to come down from its cross. They concealed the processes by which this was accomplished under three alchemical metaphoric expressions: the casting of the molten sea, the making of the rose diamond, and the achieving of the philosopher's stone. While the intellectualist flounders among contradictory theories, the mystic treats the problem in an entirely different manner. He believes that the true Rosicrucian fraternity, consisting of a school of supermen, not unlike the fabled Mahatmas of India, is an institution existing not in the visible world, but in its spiritual counterpart, which he sees fit to call the inner planes of nature. That the brothers can be reached only by those who are capable of transcending the limitations of the material world. To substantiate their viewpoint, these mystics cite the following significant statement from the Confessio Fraternitatis: 1,000 times the unworthy may clamor, 1,000 times may present themselves, yet God hath commanded our ears that they should hear none of them, and hath so compassed us about with his clouds that unto us, his servants, no violence can be done. Wherefore now no longer are we beheld by human eyes, unless they have received strength borrowed from the eagle. In mysticism, the eagle is a symbol of initiation, the spinal spirit fire, and by this is explained the inability of the unregenerated world to understand the secret order of the Rose Cross. The crest of Johann, Valentin, Andrea. The reference to the four red roses and a white cross in the chemical marriage of Christian Rosencreutz identified Johann Valentin Andrea as its author, for his family crest, shown above, consisted of four red roses and a white cross. Those professing this theory regard the Comte de Saint Germain as their highest adept and assert that he and Christian Rosencreutz were one and the same individual. They accept fire as their universal symbol because it was the one element by means of which they could control the metals. They declared themselves the descendants of Tubal-Cain and Hiram-Abib, and that the purpose of their existence was to preserve the spiritual nature of man through ages of materiality. The Gnostic sects, the Arabs, alchemists, Templars, Rosicrucians, and lastly the Freemasons form the Western chain in the transmission of occult science. Max Heindel, the Christian mystic, described the Rosicrucian temple as an etheric structure located in and around the home of a European country gentleman. He believed that this invisible building would ultimately be moved to the American continent. Mr. Heindel referred to the Rosicrucian initiates as so advanced in the science of life that death had forgotten them. Rosicrucian doctrines and tenets. Trustworthy information is unavailable concerning the actual philosophical beliefs, political aspirations, and humanitarian activities of the Rosicrucian fraternity. Today, as of old, the mysteries of the society are preserved inviolate by virtue of their essential nature, and attempts to interpret Rosicrucian philosophy are but speculations, anything to the contrary notwithstanding. Evidence points to the probable existence of two distinct Rosicrucian bodies: an inner organization whose members never revealed their identity or teachings to the world, and an outer body under the supervision of the inner group. In all probability, the symbolic tomb of Christian Rosencreutz, Knight of the Golden Stone, was in reality this outer body, the spirit of which is in a more exalted sphere. For a period of more than a century subsequent to 1614, the outer body circulated tracts and manifestos under either its own name or the names of various initiated members. The purpose of these writings was apparently to confuse and mislead investigators and thus effectively to conceal the actual designs of the fraternity. When Rosicrucianism became the philosophical fad of the 17th century, numerous documents on the subject were also circulated for purely commercial purposes by impostors desirous of capitalizing its popularity. The cunningly contrived artifices of the fraternity itself and the blundering literary impostures of charlatans formed a double veil behind which the inner organization carried on its activities in a manner totally dissimilar to its purposes and principles as publicly disseminated. The Fratres Rosicrucis naively refer to the misunderstandings which they have, for obvious reasons, permitted to exist concerning themselves as being clouds within which they labor and behind which they are concealed. An inkling of the substance of Rosicrucianism, its esoteric doctrines, can be gleaned from an analysis of its shadow, its esoteric writings. In one of the most important of their clouds, the Confessio Fraternitatis, the brethren of the fraternity of RC seek to justify their existence and explain the purposes and activities of their order. In its original form, the Confessio is divided into 14 chapters, which are here epitomized. Confessio Fraternitatis RC ad eruditos Europe. Chapter 1. Do not through hasty judgment or prejudice misinterpret the statements concerning our fraternity published in our previous manifesto. Jehovah, beholding the decadence of civilization, seeks to redeem humanity by revealing to the willing and by thrusting upon the reluctant those secrets which previously he had reserved for his elect. By this wisdom the godly shall be saved, but the sorrows of the ungodly shall be multiplied. While the true purpose of our order was set forth in the Fama Fraternitatis, misunderstandings have arisen through which we have been falsely accused of heresy and treason. In this document, we hope to clarify our position that the learned of Europe will be moved to join with us in the dissemination of divine knowledge according to the will of our illustrious founder. Chapter 2. While it is alleged by many that the philosophic side, JBH, of our day is sound, we declare it to be false and soon to die of its own inherent weakness. Just as nature, however, provides a remedy for each new disease that manifests itself, so our fraternity has provided a remedy for the infirmities of the world's philosophic system. The secret philosophy of the RC is founded upon that knowledge which is the sum of head of all faculties, sciences, and arts. By our divinely revealed system, which partakes much of theology and medicine, but little of jurisprudence, we analyze the heavens and the earth, but mostly we study man himself, within whose nature is concealed the supreme secret. If the learned of out day will accept our invitation and join themselves to our fraternity, we will reveal to them undreamed of secrets and wonders concerning the hidden workings of nature. Chapter 3. Do not believe that the secrets discussed in this brief document are lightly esteemed by us. We cannot describe fully the marvels of our fraternity, lest the uninformed be overwhelmed by our astonishing declarations and the vulgar ridicule of mysteries which they do not comprehend. We also fear that many will be confused by the unexpected generosity of our proclamation, for not understanding the wonders of this sixth age. They do not realize the great changes which are to come. Like blind men living in a world full of light, they discern only through the sense of feeling. By sight is implied spiritual cognition, by feeling the material senses. Chapter 4. We firmly believe that through deep meditation on the inventions of the human mind and the mysteries of life, through the cooperation of the angels and spirits, and through experience and long observation, Our loving Christian father, CRC, was so fully illumined with God's wisdom that were all the books and writings of the world lost and the foundations of science overturned, the fraternity of RC could reestablish the structure of world thought upon the foundation of divine truth and integrity. Because of the great depth and perfection of our knowledge, those desiring to understand the mysteries of the fraternity of RC cannot attain to that wisdom immediately, but must grow in understanding and knowledge. Therefore, our fraternity is divided into grades through which each must ascend step by step to the great arcanum. Now that it has pleased God to lighten unto us his sixth candelabrum, it is not better to seek truth in this way than to wander through the labyrinths of worldly ignorance. Furthermore, those who receive this knowledge shall become masters of all arts and crafts. No secret shall be hidden from them, and all good works of the past, present, and future shall be accessible to them. The whole world shall become as one book, and the contradictions of science and theology shall be reconciled. Rejoice, O humanity, for the time has come when God has decreed that the number of our fraternity shall be increased, a labor that we have joyously undertaken. The doors of wisdom are now open to the world, but only to those who have earned the privilege may the brothers present themselves, for it is forbidden to reveal our knowledge even to our own children. The right to receive spiritual truth cannot be inherited, it must be evolved within the soul of man himself. Chapter 5. Though we may be accused of indiscretion in offering our treasures so freely and promiscuously without discriminating between the godly, the wise, the prince, the peasant, we affirm that we have not betrayed our trust. For although we have published our fama in 5 languages, only those understand it who have that right. Our society is not to be discovered by curiosity seekers, but only by serious and consecrated thinkers. Nevertheless, we have circulated our fama in 5 mother tongues so that the righteous of all nations may have an opportunity to know of us, even though they be not scholars. 1,000 times the unworthy may present themselves and clamor at the gates, but God has forbidden us of the fraternity of RC to hear their voices, and he has surrounded us with his clouds and his protection so that no harm may come to us. And God has decreed that we of the order of RC can no longer be seen by mortal eyes unless they have received strength borrowed from the eagle. We further affirm that we shall reform the governments of Europe and pattern them according to the system applied by the philosophers of Damkar. All men desirous of securing knowledge shall receive as much as they are capable of understanding. The rule of false theology shall be overthrown, and God shall make his will known through his chosen philosophers. Chapter 7. Because of the need of brevity, it is enough to say that our father CRC was born in the year 1378 and departed at the age of 106, leaving to us the labor of spreading the doctrine of philosophic religion to the entire world. Our fraternity is open to all who sincerely seek for truth, but we publicly warn the false and impious that they cannot betray or injure us, for God has protected our fraternity, and all who seek to do it harm shall have their evil designs return and destroy them, while the treasures of our fraternity shall remain untouched, to be used by the lion in the establishment of his kingdom. Chapter 7. We declare that God, before the end of the world, shall create a great flood of spiritual light to alleviate the sufferings of humankind. Falsehood and darkness, which have crept into the arts, sciences, religions, and governments of humanity, making it difficult for even the wise to discover the path of reality, shall be forever removed and a single standard established, so that all may enjoy the fruitage of truth. We shall not be recognized as those responsible for this change, for people shall say that it is the result of the progressiveness of the age. Great are the reforms about to take place, but we of the fraternity of our seed do not arrogate to ourselves the glory for this divine reformation, since many there are, not members of our fraternity, but honest, true, and wise men, who by their intelligence and their writing shall hasten its coming. We testify that sooner the stones shall rise up and offer their services, that than that there shall be any lack of righteous persons to execute the will of God upon earth. Chapter 8. That no one may doubt, we declare that God has sent messengers and signs in the heavens, namely the one new star in Serpentarius and Cygnus, to show that a great council of the elect is to take place. This proves that God reveals invisible nature for the discerning few, signs and symbols of all things that are coming to pass. God has given man 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and 2 ears, but only 1 tongue. Whereas the eyes, the nostrils, and the ears admit the wisdom of nature into the mind, the tongue alone may give it forth. In various ages, there have been illumined ones who have seen, smelt, tasted, or heard the will of God, but it will shortly come to pass that those who have seen, smelt, tasted, or heard shall speak, and truth shall be revealed. But this revelation of righteousness is possible. However, the world must sleep away the intoxication of her poisoned chalice, filled with the false life of the theological vine, and opening her heart to virtue and understanding, welcoming the rising sun of truth. Chapter 9. We have a magic writing copied from that divine alphabet with which God writes his will upon the face of celestial and terrestrial nature. With this new language, we read God's will for all his creatures, and just as astronomers predict eclipses, so we prognosticate the obscurations of the church and how long they shall last. Our language is like unto that of Adam and Enoch before the fall. And though we understand and can explain our mysteries in this our sacred language, we cannot do so in Latin, a tongue contaminated by the confusion of Babylon. Chapter 10. Although there are still certain powerful persons who oppose and hinder us, because of which we must remain concealed, we exhort those who would become our fraternity to study unceasingly the sacred scriptures, for such as do this cannot be far from us. We do not mean that the Bible should be continually in the mouth of man, but that he should search for its true and eternal meaning, which is seldom discovered by theologians, scientists, or mathematicians, because they are blinded by the opinions of their sects. We bear witness that never since the beginning of the world has there been given to man a more excellent book than the Bible, the Holy Bible. Blessed is he who possesses it, more blessed is he who reads it, most blessed is he who understands it, and most godlike he who obeys it. Chapter 11. We wish the statements we made in the Fama Fraternitatis concerning the transmutation of metals and the universal medicine to be lightly understood. While we realize that both these works are attainable by man, we fear that many really great minds may be led away from the true quest of knowledge and understanding if they permit themselves to limit their investigation to the transmutation of metals. When to a man is given power to heal disease, to overcome poverty, and to reach a position of worldly dignity, that man is beset by numerous temptations, and unless he possess true knowledge and full understanding, he will become a terrible menace to mankind. The alchemist who attains to the art of transmuting base metals can do all manner of evil unless his understanding be as great as his self-created wealth. We therefore affirm that man must first gain knowledge, virtue, and understanding, then all other things may be added unto him. We accuse the Christian church of the great sin of possessing power and using it unwisely. Therefore, we prophesy that it shall fall by the weight of its own iniquities, and its crown shall be brought to naught. Chapter 12. In concluding our confessio, we earnestly admonish you to cast aside the worthless books of pseudo alchemists and philosophers, of whom there are many in our age, who make light of the Holy Trinity and deceive the credulous with meaningless enigmas. One of the greatest of these is a stage player, a man with sufficient ingenuity for imposition. Such men are mingled by the enemy of human welfare among those who seek to do good, thus making truth more difficult of discovery. Believe us, truth is simple and unconcealed, while falsehood is complex, deeply hidden, proud, and its fictitious worldly knowledge, seemingly aglitter with godly luster, is often mistaken for divine wisdom. You that are wise will turn from these false teachings and come to us, who seek not your money, but freely offer you our greater treasure. We desire not your goods, but that you should become partakers of our goods. We do not desire parables, but invite you to understand all parables and all secrets. We do not ask you to receive us, but invite you to come unto our kingly houses and palaces, not because of ourselves, but because we are so ordered by the Spirit of God. The desire of our most excellent Father, CRC, and the need of the present moment, which is very great. Chapter 13. Now that we have made our position clear, that we sincerely confess Christ, disavow the papacy, devote our lives to true philosophy and worthy living, and daily invite and admit into our fraternity the worthy of all nations, who thereafter share with us the light of God, will you not join yourselves with us to the perfection of yourselves, the development of all the arts, and the service of the world? If you will take this up, the treasures of every part of the earth shall be at one time given unto you, and the darkness which envelopes human knowledge and which results in the vanities of material arts and sciences shall be forever dispelled. Chapter 14. Again, we warn those who are dazzled by the glitter of gold, or those who now upright might be turned by great riches to a life of idleness and pomp, not to disturb our sacred silence with their clamorings. For though there be a medicine which will cure all diseases and give unto all men wisdom, yet it is against the will of God that men should attain to understanding by any means other than virtue, labor, and integrity. We are not permitted to manifest ourselves to any man except it be by the will of God. Those who believe that they can partake of our spiritual wealth against the will of God or without his sanction will find that they shall sooner lose their lives in seeking us than attain happiness by finding us. Johann Valentin Andrea is generally reputed to be the author of the Confessio. It is a much mooted question, however, whether Andre did not permit his name to be used as a pseudonym by Sir Francis Bacon. Apropos of this subject are two extremely significant references occurring in the introduction to that remarkable potpourri, The Anatomy of Melancholy. This volume first appeared in 1621 from the pen of Democritus Jr., who was afterwards identified as Robert Burton, who in turn was a suspected intimate of Sir Francis Bacon. One reference archly suggests that at the time of publishing The Anatomy of Melancholy in 1621, the founder of the Fraternity of RC was still alive. This statement, concealed from general recognition by its textual involvement, has escaped the notice of most students of Rosicrucianism. In the same work, there also appears a short footnote of stupendous import. It contains merely the words Job, Valent, Andreas, Lord Verulam. This single line definitely relates Johann Valentin Andre to Sir Francis Bacon, who was Lord Verulam, and by its punctuation intimates that they are one and the same individual. In certain esoteric circles, there are vague rumors which intimate that the humble personality of Johann Valentin Andre masked an exalted emissary of the Rosencreutz. While there is sufficient evidence at hand to establish the actual existence of a German theologian by the name of Andre, there are many discrepancies in his biography which have not been cleared up to the satisfaction of critical investigators. A comparison of the face shown above with that of Sir Francis Bacon discloses striking resemblances in spite of the differences due to age. If Lord Bacon borrowed the name and identity of William Shakespeare, he could also assume after his mock funeral in England the personality of Johann Valentin Andrea. The crescent below the bust is significant as it also appears upon the crest of Lord Bacon, to denote that he was the second son of Sir Nicholas Bacon. Further, the four letters OMDC in the frame at the lower right corner of the plate by a very simple Baconian cipher can be changed into number whose sum gives 33, the numerical equivalent of the name Bacon. These several points of interest, when considered together, go far towards clearing up the mystery surrounding the authorship of the first Rosicrucian manifestos. Prominent among Rosicrucian apologists was John Hayden, who inscribes himself a servant of God and a secretary of nature. In his curious work, The Rosy Cross Uncovered, he gives an enigmatic but valuable description of the fraternity of RC in the following language. Now there are a kind of men, as they themselves report, named Rosicrucians, a divine fraternity that inhabit the suburbs of heaven, and these are the officers of the generalissimo of the world, that are as the eyes and ears of the great king, seeing and hearing all things. They say these Rosicrucians are seraphically illuminated as Moses was, according to this order of the elements: earth refined to water, water to air, air to fire. A symbolic diagram of the operations of nature. This plate, engraved by de Bry, is the most famous of the diagrams illustrating the philosophic principles of Robert Fludd, Robertus de Fluctibus. Three figures are outstanding links between Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry: Michael Meyer, Elias Ashmole, and Robert Fludd. De Quincey considers Robert Fludd to be the immediate father of Freemasonry. Edward Waite considers Robert Fludd as second to none of the disciples of Paracelsus, even going as far as to declare that Fludd far surpassed his master. He further adds the central figure of Rosicrucian literature, towering as an intellectual giant above the crowd of souffleurs, theosophists, and charlatanic professors of the magnum opus, who directly or otherwise were connected with the mysterious brotherhood, is Robertus de Fluctibus, the great English mystical philosopher of the 17th century, a man of immense erudition, of exalted mind, and, to judge by his writings, of extreme personal sanctity. Robert Fludd was born in 1574 and died in 1637. The de Bry diagram shown above is almost self-explanatory. Outside the circle of the starry heavens are the three fiery rings of the Empyrean, the triple fire of the supreme creator, in which dwell the celestial creatures. Within he of the stars are the circles of the planets and elements. After the element of air comes the circle of the world, earth. The circle of animals is followed by the circle of plants, which in turn is followed by the circle of the minerals. Then come various industries, and in the center is a terrestrial globe with an ape-man sitting upon it, measuring a sphere with a pair of compasses. This little figure represents the animal creation. In the outer ring of fire above is the sacred name of Jehovah, surrounded by clouds. From these clouds issues a hand holding a chain. Between the divine sphere and the lower world, personified by the ape, is the figure of a woman. It is to be specially noted that the female figure is merely holding the chain connecting her with the lower world, but the chain connecting her with the higher world ends in a shackle about her wrist. This female figure is capable of several interpretations. She may represent humanity suspended between divinity and the beast. She may represent nature as the link between God and the lower world, or she may represent the human soul, the common denominator between the superior and the inferior. He further declares that these mysterious brethren possessed polymorphous powers appearing in any desired form at will. In the preface of the same work, he enumerates the strange powers of the Rosicrucian adepts. I shall here tell you what Rosicrucians are, and that Moses was their father, and he was whatever that is. Some say they were of the order of Elias. Some say the disciples of Ezekiel. For it should seem Rosicrucians were not only initiated into the Mosaical theory, but have arrived also to the power of working miracles as Moses, Elijah, Ezekiel, and the succeeding prophets did, as being transported where they please, as Habakkuk was from Jewry to Babylon, or as Philip after he had baptized the eunuch to Azarus. And one of these went from me to a friend of mine in Devonshire and came and brought me an answer to London the same day, which is 4 days' journey. They caught me excellent predictions of astrology and earthquakes. They slacked the plague in cities. They silenced the violent winds and tempests. They calmed the rage of the sea and rivers. They walk in the air. They frustrate the malicious aspects of witches. They cure all diseases. The writings of John Hayden are considered a most important contribution to Rosicrucian literature. John Hayden was probably related to Sir Christopher Hayden, a seraphic illuminated Rosicrucian, whom the late F. Lay Gardner, honorary secretary Sec Rose in Anglia, believes to have been the source of his Rosicrucian knowledge. In his Bibliotheca Rosicruciana, he makes the following statement concerning John Hayden. On the whole, from the internal evidence of his writings, he appears to have gone through the lower grade of the RC order and to have given out much of this to the world. John Hayden traveled extensively, visiting Arabia, Egypt, Persia, and various parts of Europe, as related in a biographical introduction to his work. The Wise Man's Crown, set with angels, planets, metals, etc., or the glory of the Rosencreutz, a work declared by him to be a translation into English of the mysterious book M, brought from Arabia by Christian Rosencreutz. Thomas Bond, Eugenius Philalethes, another champion of the order, corroborates the statement of John Hayden concerning the ability of the Rosicrucian initiates to make themselves invisible at will. The fraternity of RC can move in this white mist. Whosoever would communicate with us must be able to see in this light, or us he will never see unless by our own will. The fraternity of RC is an august and sovereign body, arbitrarily manipulating the symbols of alchemy, Kabbalism, astrology, and magic to the attainment of its own peculiar purposes, but entirely independent of the cult whose terminology it employs. The three major objects of the fraternity are: one, the abolition of all monarchical forms of government and the substitution thereof of the rulership of the philosophic elect. The present democracies are the direct outgrowth of Rosicrucian efforts to liberate the Moors from the domination of despotism. In the early part of the 18th century, the Rosicrucians turned their attention to the new American colonies, then forming the nucleus of a great nation in the New World. The American War of Independence represents their first great political experiment and resulted in the establishment of a national government founded upon the fundamental principles of divine and natural law. As an imperishable reminder of their sub rosa activities, the Rosicrucians left the Great Seal of the United States. The Rosicrucians were also the instigators of the French Revolution, but in this instance were not wholly successful, owing to the fact that the fanaticism of the revolutionists could not be controlled and the reign of terror ensued. 2. The Reformation of science, philosophy, and ethics. The Rosicrucians declared that the material arts and sciences were but shadows of the divine wisdom, and that only by penetrating the innermost recesses of nature could man attain to reality and understanding. Though calling themselves Christians, the Rosicrucians were evidently Platonists and also profoundly versed in the deepest mysteries of early Hebrew and Hindu theology. There is undeniable evidence that the Rosicrucians desired to establish the institutions of the ancient mysteries as the foremost method of instructing humanity in the secret and eternal doctrine. Indeed, being in all probability the perpetuators of the ancient mysteries, the Rosicrucians were able to maintain themselves against the obliterating forces of dogmatic Christianity only by absolute secrecy and the subtlety of their subterfuges. They so carefully guarded and preserved the supreme mystery, the identity and interrelationship of the three cells, that no one to whom they did not of their own accord reveal themselves has ever secured any satisfactory information regarding either the existence or the purpose of the order. The Fraternity of RC, through its outer organization, is gradually creating an environment or body in which the illustrious Brother CRC may ultimately incarnate and consummate for humanity the vast spiritual and material labors of the fraternity. The alchemical androgyny. The Turbe Philosophorum is one of the earliest known documents on alchemy in the Latin tongue. Its exact origin is unknown. It's sometimes referred to as the Third Pythagorean Synod. As its name implies, it is an assembly of the sages and sets forth the alchemical viewpoints of many of the early Greek philosophers. The symbol reproduced above is from a rare edition of the Turbe Philosophorum published in Germany in 1750 and represents by a hermaphroditic figure the accomplishment of the magnum opus. The active and passive principles of nature were often depicted by male and female figures, and when these two principles were harmoniously conjoined in any one nature or body, it was customary to symbolize this state of perfect equilibrium by the composite figure above shown. 3. The discovery of the universal medicine or panacea for all forms of disease. There is ample evidence that the Rosicrucians were successful in their quest for the elixir of life. In this Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, Elias Ashmole states that the Rosicrucians were not appreciated in England, but were welcomed on the continent. He also states that Queen Elizabeth was twice cured of the smallpox by the Brethren of the Rosy Cross, and that the Earl of Norfolk was healed of leprosy by a Rosicrucian physician. In the quotations that follow it, is hinted by John Hayden that the brothers of the fraternity possessed the secret of prolonging human existence indefinitely, but not beyond the time appointed by the will of God. And at last they could restore by the same course every brother that died to life again, and so continue many ages. The rules you find in the fourth book after this manner began the fraternity of the Rosy Cross. First, by 4 persons who died and rose again until Christ, and then they came to worship as the star guided them to Bethlehem of Judea, where lay our Savior in his mother's arms. And then they opened their treasure and presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and by the commandment of God went home to their habitation. These 4, waxing young, again successfully many hundreds of years, made a magical language and writing, with a large dictionary which we yet daily use to God's praise and glory, and do find great wisdom therein. Now, whilst Brother C.R. was in a proper womb quickening, they concluded to draw and receive yet others more into their fraternity. Count Michael Meyer, physician to Rudolph II, was an outstanding figure in the Rosicrucian controversy. There is little doubt that he was an initiated member of the Rosicrucian fraternity, empowered by the order to promulgate its secrets among the philosophic elect of Europe. The above title page shows the 7 planets represented by appropriate figures. Behind the central figure in each case is a smaller emblem signifying the zodiacal sign in which the planet is enthroned. In the arch over the title itself is a portrait of the learned Meyer. The volume of which this is the title page is devoted to an analysis of the nature and effect of the 7 planets and is couched in alchemical terminology throughout. Michael Meyer concealed his knowledge so cunningly that it is exceedingly difficult to track from his writings the secrets which he possessed. He was profuse in his use of emblems, and the greater part of his philosophical lore is concealed in the engravings which illustrate his books. The womb herein referred to was apparently the glass casket or container in which the brothers were buried. This was also called the philosophical egg. After a certain period of time, the philosopher, breaking the shell of his egg, came forth and functioned for a prescribed period, after which he retired again into his shell of glass. The Rosicrucian medicine for the healing of all human infirmities may be interpreted either as a chemical substance which produces the physical effects described, or as spiritual understanding, the true healing power which, when a man has partaken of it, reveals truth to him. Ignorance is the worst form of disease, and that which heals ignorance is therefore the most potent of all medicines. The perfect Rosicrucian medicine was for the healing of nations, races, and individuals. In an early unpublished manuscript, an unknown philosopher declares alchemy, Kabbalism, astrology, and magic to have been divine sciences originally, but that through perversion they had become false doctrines, leading seekers after wisdom even farther from their goal. The same author gives a valuable key to esoteric Rosicrucianism by dividing the path of spiritual attainment into 3 steps or schools, which he calls mountains. The first and lowest of these mountains is Mount Sophia, the second Mount Kabbalah, and the third Mount Magia. These 3 mountains are sequential stages of spiritual growth. The unknown author then states, by philosophy is to be understood the knowledge of the workings of nature, by which knowledge man learns to climb to those higher mountains above the limitations of sense. By Kabbalism is to be understood the language of the angelic or celestial beings, and he who masters it is able to converse with the messengers of God. On the highest of the mountains is the school of Magia, divine magic, which is the language of God, wherein man is taught the true nature of all things by God himself. There is a growing conviction that if the true nature of Rosicrucianism were divulged, it would cause consternation, to say the least. Rosicrucian symbols have many meanings, but the Rosicrucian meaning has not yet been revealed. The mount upon which stands the house of the Rosy Cross is still concealed by clouds, in which the brethren hide both themselves and their secrets. Michael Meyer writes, what is contained in the Fama and Confessio is true. It is a very childish objection that the brotherhood have promised so much and performed so little. With them, as elsewhere, many are called, but few are chosen. The masters of the order hold out the rose as the remote prize, but they impose the cross on those who are entering. The rose and the cross appear upon the stained glass windows of Lichfield Chapter House, where Walter Conrad Arsenberg believes Lord Bacon and his mother to have been buried. A crucified rose within a heart is watermarked into the dedication page of the 1628 edition of Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. The elementary world. The outer circle contains the figures of the zodiac. The second, their signs in that part of the human body which they rule. The third, the months of the year, which with brief notes concerning temperaments, etc. The fourth circle contains the elements accompanied by their appropriate symbols, and the following seven circles mark the orbits of the planets, also the planetary angels, the seven major members of the universal man, and the seven metals, each division appearing under its appropriate element according to the elemental names in the fourth circle. In the 12th circle appears the words, there are three principles, three worlds, three ages, and three kingdoms. In the 13th circle appear the names of the 12 arts and sciences, which are considered essential to spiritual growth. In the 14th circle is the word nature. The 15th circle contains the following words. It is the great honor of faithful souls that from their very birth an angel is appointed to preserve and keep each of them. The fundamental symbols of the Rosicrucians were the rose and the cross, the rose female and the cross male, both universal phallic symbols, which such learned gentlemen as Thomas Inman, Hargrave Jennings, and Richard Payne Knight have truly observed that the rose and the cross typify the generative processes. These scholars seem unable to pierce the veil of symbolism. They do not realize that the creative mystery in the material world is merely a shadow of the divine creative mystery in the spiritual world. Because of the phallic significance of their symbols, both the Rosicrucians and the Templars have been falsely accused of practicing obscene rites in their secret ceremonials. While it is quite true that the alchemical retort symbolizes the womb, it also has a far more significant meaning concealed under the allegory of the second birth. As generation is the key to material existence, it is natural that the fraternity of RC should adopt as its characteristic symbols those exemplifying the reproductive processes. As regeneration is the key to spiritual existence, they therefore founded their symbolism upon the rose and the cross, which typify the redemption of man through the union of his lower temporal nature with his higher eternal nature. The rosy cross is also a hieroglyphic figure representing the formula of the universal medicine. And we're going to end it here. Stay tuned for the 15 Rosicrucian and Kabbalistic diagrams. Thanks again for tuning in and listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Peace.